So I just wanted to make a quick video on what makes tubes sound so different. I know this is a popular topic and discussion. I will be talking more in depth in the electronics section of my page, but I just want to do something here for guitar players and musicians that are interested in the topic. So what makes tubes sound so much different from solid state? And I'd say there's two major things that make them sound different. One is the way they operate, how they function. And two is the voltage that they operate at. So for number one, tubes operate off heat, whereas solid state devices operate on material, basically, right? So a solid state device is usually made out of silicone, and that silicone is doped with positive and negative charges. And that's the way it amplifies signal. Whereas a vacuum tube uses heat, and it uses the electrons that come off that heat to swing the voltage. So that's like one thing that's very different, and that makes all the difference in the way they sound. Also, it makes a great difference in working with them. So tubes not only sound good, but they're also much easier to engineer with because they lend themselves to just function in a very simplistic way for swinging voltage. I mean, they're great and amplifying devices for a preamp section. Now, number two, and this is something that is actually part of the downfall of tubes, is that they operate at a high voltage. Now, this is good and bad in a certain way because it takes more equipment. It takes a bigger transformer to power them. Bigger transformers are heavier. You usually have to make chassis bigger because of that. And that's where your solid state, that's where we have so many portable devices. As with the advent of the solid state device, the transistors were able to make things small and portable and operate on even less than a 9-volt battery. So, you know, a AA, AAA can power transistors, whereas tubes typically need high voltage. Though that is not completely a negative thing in relation to the tubes, because that high voltage gives you more dynamic range. And that's something that solid state devices suffer from. So in terms of, let's say, engineering a preamplifier and doing it for tubes as opposed to doing it with solid state, when you're going to engineer an amplifier or a preamp for solid state, one of your main concerns is going to be how to get as much dynamic range out of that package as you would a tube. And it's usually going to take a lot more effort. It's going to take a lot more circuitry. And it's going to take, let's say, a lot more finesse, right? It's going to take a lot more effort to accomplish the same thing that you could do with one tube very easily and very cleanly. You might have to do with an abundance of parts with a solid state device. So those are the two reasons. Again, the heat as opposed to a material process, and then two would be voltage. The voltage gives us great dynamic range in tubes, but it's also to their detriment because that's actually part of what makes them more expensive to operate, and it makes the tube gear heavy. But that's also part of the benefit for solid state, but a little bit of its drawback because operating at such low voltages restricts the dynamic range of the devices. So, and again, I'll go into this more in detail later. It's actually one of my favorite topics, so I'll be covering a lot about it. Thanks.